Joseph Keller used to jog around the Stanford campus, and he was struck by all the women jogging around as well. He was struck by their lovely, their bouncy ponytails. Why did their ponytails swing from side to side like that? Being a physicist, he set out to answer why. Professor Keller was curious about many things. How teapots dribble, why earthworms wriggle. Heck, in his spare time, he studied whether underwater nuclear tests could set off tsunamis. Till 3 months ago, I hadn't heard of Joseph Keller. I read about him in the New York Times, in the Obituaries. So he died 3 months ago, and I read about him in the New York Times in the Obituaries. The New York Times had half a page dedicated to him in their print edition, which, as you can imagine, is premium space for a newspaper of their stature. Actually, I read the obituaries in the New York Times almost every day. My wife, understandably, thinks I'm rather morbid to begin our day with scrambled eggs and let's see who died today. But I take solace in the fact that there are at least 22,000 other morbid people like me. That's the number of people who follow the New York Times obituaries on Twitter. But if you think about it, the front page of any newspaper is usually bad news and highlights man's failures. Scandal, strife, controversy, crime, these are the things found on the front page. An instance where bad news cues accomplishment is at the end of the paper, in the obituaries. In my day job, I focus on future insights that marketers can derive from past data. It's kind of like a rear view mirror analysis. And I began to think, what if I applied this rear view mirror to data from the New York Times obituaries? What might that teach us? Were there lessons on how you could get your obituary featured, even if you aren't around to enjoy it? Would this go well with scrambled eggs? So we looked at the data. 2,000 obituaries over a 20-month period between 2015 and 2016. I say we because an analysis of this magnitude is too much for one person. And so I begged, borrowed, and stole my colleagues' time and talent to codify and interpret the data, and for this, I'm grateful to them. So what do these 2,000 deaths, rather 2,000 lives, teach us? For starters, let's look at some demographics. Like, what's the ratio of men to women? Men are written about 4 times as often as women. Not something to take lying down. This is simply a reflection of life and chauvinism that existed in the mid-1900s. The good news is this is changing. So when the people who are doing amazing stuff today die in 50 years, that will look different, hopefully. How old were they when they died? On an average, 81. And their ages ranged from 19-year-old Lauryn Hill, who played basketball for Mount St. Joseph University while contending with an inoperable brain tumor, to Ruth Newman, who at 113 was the last female survivor of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. What did they die of? Causes of death were what you would expect in any population. Cancer and heart disease accounted for many of the deaths. Death certainly doesn't discriminate. What were these people remembered for? To answer that, we need to look at words. This here is a headline of an obituary. This one is of the amazing Lee Kuan Yew. If you remove the beginning and the end, you're left with a beautifully worded descriptor that in just a few words aims to capture an achievement over a lifetime. Just looking at these is fascinating. It's riveting. Let me show you a few. Try and guess who they are. These are all famous people who died in the last couple of years. This one's Prince. Who's this? Absolutely. My favorite songwriter. And come on. Oh, yes. So we took those descriptors and did what's called natural language processing. Where you feed these into a program, the program takes out all the superfluous words like the, and, of, the kind of words you can mime easily in charades, and then it leaves you with the most significant words. And not just for these 5, for all 2,000 descriptors. And this is what it looks like. The arts, film, theater, literature, music, dance, and of course, art are huge. You have to ask why in so many societies, including ours here in India, we insist that our kids pursue engineering and business and law and medicine to be counted as successful. And while we're talking profession, let's take a look at age again. What is the average age at which they accomplished things? On an average, that number is 37. What that means is, on an average, you got to hit 37 before you first achieve something significant. That you will be written about for 44 years later when you die at 81. Talk about having to be patient. Of course, it varies with profession. If you're a sports star, you'll probably hit your stride much earlier, in your 20s. And if you're in your 40s, like me, you can join the fun world of politics. Because politicians do their first and sometimes only commendable act in their mid-40s. And sometimes, getting your obituary written about is simply a matter of timing. Stephen Bolenbach, a hotelier who was featured earlier this year, had spared Donald Trump from declaring personal bankruptcy in the 90s. And we all know President-elect Trump wasn't just in the news this year, he was the news. And if you're wondering what those others are, here are some examples. Voodoo, topless entertainment, a tailor to presidents. Isn't it fascinating, the tapestry of life, the things people do, and the things they're remembered for? Oh, and hang in there if you're a student. Less than 5% of the 2,000 dropped out of school or college. Dropping out is romantically overrated. At least for the folks who died up till now. Parents, you can thank me later. At this point, our curiosity was on overdrive, and we said, what if we ingest even more data? So we went beyond the headline into the entire first paragraph, did it for all 2,000 obituaries, but did it separately for 2 groups of people. People that are famous and people that are not famous. Famous people, Leonard Cohen, Prince, Muhammad Ali, Harper Lee. Not so famous people. People like Jocelyn Cooper, Reverend Curry, Lorna Kelly, who spent time with Mother Teresa in Calcutta. Amazing people. I'm sure you haven't heard any of their names. They're not famous. So what if we analyze the first paragraph of the obituaries of the folks who are famous and the folks who are not famous? How would those look side by side? Here's how. Take a moment to look at that. 2 things leap out at me. First, John. Anyone here named John should thank your parents and remind your kids to cut out your obituary when you're gone. And second, help. We uncovered many lessons from lives well led and what those people immortalized in print could teach us. The exercise was a fascinating testament to the kaleidoscope that is life. And even more fascinating was that the overriding majority of obituaries featured people, famous and non-famous, who did seemingly extraordinary things. They made a positive dent in the fabric of society. They helped. So ask yourselves as you go back to your daily lives, how am I using my talents to help society? Because the most powerful lesson here is, if more people lived their lives trying to be famous in death, the world would be a much better place. Thank you.